into the fray.
My father was a narcissist. He never saw anything beyond the boundaries of his own ego. But even so, he had wisdom about the world. One of the pieces of wisdom that stayed with me is that there are many in the world who will try to tear you down. You must be good to those who stand with you, because your ire belongs to those who stand against you. But the line is not always so clear, is it? At the start of this sermon, I'd like to talk about those who stand against you in subtler ways. I'm not talking about the haters. I'm not talking about those who criticize loftily from the shadows, from the cold safety of their anonymity. I'm talking about those critics who tear you down at proximity. I speak of the parent or parents who, instead of building you up into something powerful, hold you down and try to keep you small. I speak of the siblings who box you in to their small-minded notions of what you can be. I speak of the friends who sharpen their smiles into daggers. These are not enemies, not in the traditional sense. They break no doors. They raise no fists. They make no declarations. They commit subtler crimes. They sabotage you from within, whispering limitations into your ears like lullabies, making your dreams seem foolish, making your ambitions seem far too grandiose. These are the ones who see your growth not as inspiration, but as an indictment. They do not want to destroy you outright. They just want to clip your wings. They want you to stay down to earth, digestible, non-threatening. They want you small, not because they hate you, but because they fear what you would become if you were left unchained. We all have these people in our lives, do we not? Those who hand us invisible weights that they call concerns. Those who scoff at our risks, not out of wisdom, but out of their own cowardice projected outward. Those who speak the language of love, but only if it keeps us tame. These people are familiar. And that is what makes them dangerous. Because when someone you love tells you to be less, you might obey them. You might even thank them for their concern. But hear me now. Love that limits is not love. Affection that stifles is not care. Advice soaked in fear is not guidance. It is nothing more than a gilded cage. Why do they comport themselves in these ways? Why do they dull your shine at every opportunity? Why do they lace every compliment with an asterisk? Every encouragement with a warning? The truth is this: they do not want you to succeed. Not on your own terms, anyway. Because if you are big, if you are powerful, if you are great, that does nothing for them but make them feel smaller and weaker and lesser. Because when they look into the mirror, they don't see themselves as they are. They see all of the things that they could have been. They see every path that they didn't take, every dream that they allowed to die, every brave thought that they silenced before it could become action. And when they see you, alive with possibility, crackling with purpose, undeterred by the very same rules that they themselves accepted, they feel the weight of their own surrender all the more profoundly. This is not because you have wronged them, but because you've reminded them of the moment in which they wronged themselves. This is the bitter truth at the root of many quiet betrayals. They resent you for swimming in the same waters in which they drown. They hate to see you flying into the bright horizon that they only dared to imagine in the quiet hours before compromise became their religion. You are a living rebuke to the bargains that they made with fear. You are what they might have been had they not let the world sand down their edges and convince them that survival was nobler than becoming. And so they punish you. Punish you for your courage, for your refusal to settle. They do it not with malice, but with melancholy, with sighs of exasperation disguised as sagely advice, with warnings dressed in care, with smiles that tighten just a little too much when you speak of your next wild idea. Perhaps they themselves are a victim of one like themselves. They listened to the wrong voice at the wrong time. A parent who feared risk, a teacher who mistook conformity for a virtue, a friend who mocked ambition because they buried their own. And that voice took root. It grew into a vine that coiled around their potential, whispering that safety is the highest calling and mediocrity the wisest path. And now, tangled in that same vine, they reach for you, not to lift you up, but to wrap you up too. Not because they're evil, but because they're afraid to be alone in their regret. Misery does not just love company, it demands it. It recruits it. It dresses itself in concern and says, I just don't want you to get hurt. But what they really mean is, I hurt, and I don't want to watch you soar while I remain grounded. What is to be done with such people? Many in this day and age demand that you cut them off, that you excise them from your life before they drag you into the muck of their misery, just so they can have a wallowing partner. And sometimes that is appropriate, but I think too often we view it as the first resort when it should be very close to the last. Because misery loves company, but so does joy. When they try to pull you into the muck, you should soar all the higher. And when they brim with their resentment, you should say to them, why not join me up here? Your dreams are not dead. They're just asleep. You don't need to wallow in misery. You can join me in the skies. Don't misunderstand me. You can't pull them up. It's not your job to pull them from the muck. It's not your job to waste your power on saving those who could save themselves but choose not to. But it is your job to show them the path. to show them by example that they need not languish in the mire of their own resignation. It is your job to be a lighthouse, not a lifeboat. Let your life speak. Let your success, your growth, your refusal to bow to fear, let that serve as an invitation. Not a sermon, not a plea, but a demonstration. Show them that joy is still possible, that dreams are still reachable, that greatness is not reserved for a chosen few, but for the ones who choose it, despite everything telling them not to. If they come to join you, welcome them with open arms. If they don't, release them with open hands. Because you must never set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm in their own self-made winter. You must never clip your own wings so someone else can feel taller. And you must never ever trade your becoming for their comfort. Let me be clear. There's nothing wrong with helping those who ask for it. If someone you know wants to escape the muck of mediocrity, but they don't know how, then you may choose to help them. But never help those who refuse it. Never help those who don't want it. Your attempts to drag them from their self-imposed prison will only be resented and rejected. You will exhaust yourself trying to save someone who has mistaken their cage for a shelter. And worse, you may begin to doubt your own freedoms just to stay close to someone who never even asked to be rescued, doesn't even want to be rescued. So let them sit, let them sulk, let them settle, if that's their choice. But do not join them. Do not mar your light to match their gloom. Do not pause your journey because they refuse to begin theirs. What sense does that make? Even if they do ask for your help, you got to weigh that decision very carefully. You must ask yourself if you are strong enough in your position to give them that help without being drained, to reach without being pulled down. Because not all cries for help come from a place of readiness. Some come from panic, from habit, from a desire to be saved without doing the work of salvation. Sometimes they may even act as if they want to be free from the swamp of their own sorrow, only to trick you close enough to pull you back in. But in all things, we must find some balance. My father, as I mentioned, was a narcissist. What does that mean? Let's consider the story that the term narcissist was derived from, the story of Narcissus, who fell in love with his own reflection and wasted away staring at it in a pool of water. Narcissus did not die because he loved himself too much. He died because he did not know how to love. He did not know how to look beyond the surface of others or of himself. He saw only the image, not the essence. My father was like that. He didn't see me. Not really. He saw his own reflection in me and judged me for how well or how poorly I mirrored back his idea of himself. And in this, he taught me something vital, that the people who cannot truly see you will often try to reshape you into something that they recognize, something that they can control, something that reflects them, not you. Because you're not a mirror. You're not here to reflect someone else's fears, someone else's failures, or someone else's fantasy. But in the pursuit of your dreams and your own greatness, you run the risk of falling into narcissism yourself, don't you? So how do you avoid this fate? First, you must remember that true greatness is not about being seen. It's about seeing clearly. Narcissism is the disease of the unexamined ego. It's what happens when the desire to become is consumed by the desire to appear. When you stop seeking truth and start seeking applause, when you build your life as a monument to your image instead of as a vessel to your purpose, there is often a tightrope that you must walk in this world. You must recognize the difference between loving yourself and loving the idea of yourself. You must recognize the difference between flatterers and truth tellers. You must recognize the difference between criticisms of those who are trying to drag you down and criticisms of those who are trying to help you ascend higher. Because not all criticism is cruelty, just as not all love is praise. My father told me a story about this very idea. I've told it on this channel before, but I'll tell it again. A little bird was flying south for the winter, but he waited too long, and so he froze in midair and plummeted to the earth. A cow came along and shit on the little bird, which warmed the bird up and thawed him out, and he was so happy that he chirped with glee. But a cat heard the bird chirping and came and dug him out of the shit and ate him. And the moral of this story is, not everyone who shits on you is your enemy, and not everyone who gets you out of some shit is your friend. So if you cannot tell who is your friend and who is your enemy based on whether they compliment you or they criticize you, then how can you tell? Remember that the true sin of Narcissus was not self-love, but that he never looked beneath the surface of himself, beneath the ideal. If you know who you truly are and where lie your true aspirations, then it will be apparent immediately who in your life is helping you and who in your life is hurting you. When you know your path, you can tell who's pointing out the cracks in your foundation so that you don't collapse and who is throwing rocks, waiting to see you fall. You can tell who's challenging you to rise and who's trying to keep you grounded so that they don't have to watch you soar. But if you don't know who you are, if you have not looked past the image, past the performance, past the noise of other people's expectations, then you will mistake every critic for a villain and every flatterer for a friend. It's no secret that my own ego is quite massive. Some, in the spaces of mysticism and psychology and other human pursuits, have preached the death of the ego as the greatest virtue. I don't see it that way. If you look at the findings of neuroscience, you will discover the same thing that Buddhists have known for centuries, that the ego is an illusion. And yet, is the illusory nature of the ego a good enough reason for its rejection? How could a chaos wizard or a chaos magician possibly believe so? For the core tenet of chaos magic is not the rejection of the illusion, it is the wielding of the illusion. The chaos magician does not deny that the ego is but a mask, he simply refuses to be enslaved by it. He wears the mask knowingly, intentionally, and ritually. He reshapes it, discards it, replaces it, because he understands that identity is not a prison, It is a tool. It is a lens. It is a spell. To kill the ego is to discard one of the greatest instruments of will. To master the ego. That is to become sovereign over the illusion. That is to step beyond both narcissism and nihilism. The Chaos Wizard says, yes, I am an illusion, but I am also the illusionist. But this philosophy, while it grants me strength, also opens me to the dangers of narcissism. For what is narcissism if not the inability to see beyond the veil of one's own ego? What is narcissism if not the inability to look beyond the constrictions of one's self-concept and truly behold the world, or truly behold another person as it is, as they are, and not merely as it reflects you? And yet here we are faced with another dilemma. For neuroscience doesn't only tell us that the self is an illusion, but that the world that we see all around us is not the truth of the world, but is merely a model constructed by our brains based on the data gathered by our senses. So truly, my siblings, we strive to do something impossible. We strive to see beyond the ego, yet we are also told that the world is but a figment of that ego. And the ego is but a figment of the brain, and the brain is but a lump of electrified meat drifting through the universe, a universe that it cannot directly perceive. We are ghosts dreaming of matter, and we are matter dreaming of ghosts. So what then does it mean to see clearly when every sight is filtered through illusion stacked upon illusion? The question becomes, when a mirror is faced with another mirror, what do they reflect? Well, they reflect an infinite regress, a corridor of reflections stretching into eternity. Each mirror reflects the other, reflecting it again and again and again and again, so on and so forth, creating a visual loop that seems to recede forever, though in reality it is bound by the imperfections of the glass and the limitations of the light and so on and so forth. But this is why Narcissus could not escape his own reflection. Because it was not only the water that reflected, he was also a mirror. The water reflected his face, and he reflected upon it, seeing both more and less than what was actually there. He told himself what he was looking at was himself, but it wasn't. It was the replication of an external image filtered through his longing, through his desire. He did not fall in love with himself, he fell in love with his projection. He mistook symbol for substance, fantasy for fact, illusion for identity. And so he drowned, not in the water, but in the endless corridor of his own misunderstood images. This, to me, is not true ego. And that is the real tragedy of narcissism. The narcissist is actually devoid of true ego. They see only the echo of ego, the mask of ego, unexamined and worshipped like an idol. They are not full of self. They are empty of self-awareness. They are trapped in the hologram of their own identity, chasing a ghost of their own making through a mirror maze of reflections. True ego, real, healthy ego, is not an illusion you are lost within, but one you wield with conscious intent. It is a center of will. When Aleister Crowley encountered the demon Choronzon in the desert ritual known as the Crossing of the Abyss, he described Choronzon as the demon of dispersion, the personification of the fragmented self. Choronzon is the voice of every doubt, every contradiction, every falsehood your mind tells you to protect itself. He is the ego out of control, not the master of illusions, but the slave to them. Choronzon is what happens when the mask forgets that it is a mask and starts to believe that it is a face. Crowley understood something essential in the chaotic desert rite, that to move forward spiritually, magically, and even psychologically, one must pass through the abyss of illusion. And that abyss is guarded by your own disintegrated ego, flailing in the dark, clinging to false certainty. Choronzon is not evil. He is dangerous because he mixes truth and lies so thoroughly that you forget that there was ever a difference. He is the cacophony of every borrowed belief and self-deception echoing back at you until you forget which voice was ever your own. To face Choronzon is to risk disillusion, but to integrate what he guards, to claim your ego not as an idol but as a sword, you must face him, not with denial, but with discipline. With the will to name illusion and still choose to wield it. This is what separates the chaos wizard from the deluded mystic. The wizard crosses the abyss and returns not untouched, but remade. Once I was trapped in this illusion. I called myself the amazing atheist. I thought that the more I was recognized by the external world, the more I mattered. I thought that if the mirror of public opinion reflected me brightly enough, then surely I would glow like an angel. But all it ever did was bounce the light back and forth between masks. I mistook provocation for power, audience for authority, volume for vision. And I wore that mask until it wore me. But now, I know better. Now I understand that the ego is not validated by applause, but by alignment. Alignment with what? With your own will. With your own purpose. With that quiet, ferocious thing inside of you that whispers, not what the world wants you to be, but what you are. Not the version of yourself shaped by fear or by expectation, but the raw, mythic core that refuses to be diminished, that refuses to be digested or digestible. This, my siblings, is the path through the mirror. Not to break it, not to shatter it, not to smash the illusion of self, but to leap through it, to master it, to look into your own reflection and say, that is not me. That is not me, but that is mine. A tool, a symbol, a vessel. And like all vessels, it must be filled with something more than performance. It must be filled with presence. Your presence. You are not born to be a reflection of someone else's fear or of your own. You are not born to decorate the cage someone else has mistaken for a cathedral. You were not born to walk the razor's edge between being and becoming. You were born to wield your mask like a blade, not to cut others down, but to carve the world as you see fit. Do I stand before you now fully realized? Do I stand before you now the master of these great truths? Do I stand before you now atop the tower of all wisdom, having fully transcended the illusions? No, because that is not the goal. The goal is not some ultimate enlightenment. There is no I have become. There is only I am becoming. Do you understand? There is no destination. There is only journey. It is said that not all who wander are lost. I once took this to mean that the destination is flexible. That what seems aimless is actually culminating in something grand. But now I see it a little differently. I see that all who wander are lost because there is no destination. Those who think there is a destination are truly lost. Those who see that there is no destination are not, because they appreciate the journey. The destination is always here and now, in this moment, in the present, with your presence. There is not an ultimate destination. There are merely stops along the road. And you may rest for a time, but that is not the destination, because there is no destination. And to the extent that there is, it is just where you stand now, where you are now. Everywhere is the destination, and nowhere is the destination. Because the destination is the journey, and the journey is the destination. Narcissus thought he had found the destination. He thought that the face in the water was the destination, the final truth. That he had arrived at the summit of beauty, the summit of identity, the summit of self. But what he found was only a mirror, the first mirror. And he made the fatal mistake of building a temple on its surface. He stopped walking, he stopped wandering, he stopped becoming, and he mistook his stillness for arrival. But the face we see in the water is always just the opening act. The ego, this mask, this construct, is not the end of the journey. It is the compass. It is the map. And if you mistake the compass for the direction, if you mistake the map for the terrain, then you will rot before the superficiality of your own false ego, never knowing your real self at all. You must wander, siblings. If the world says, do not wander, then you must ignore the world. If your loved ones say, do not wander, then you must ignore them. If the false ego of narcissism says, do not wander, then you must ignore it. You will die before death in the swamp of applause, in the muck of obligation, in the mirror maze of narcissism. There will be plenty of time for death when you are actually dead, my dear ones. Now is not the time for death. Now is the time for life. And life is not standing still. Life is not some ultimate revelation. Nor is it a carefully curated image that you can hold up so that others may admire it. Life is movement. It is friction. It is the chaos of growth, the pain of transformation, the thunder of becoming. It is not perfection. It is progression. It is not completion. It is combustion. You are the fire, and you burn not to destroy, at least not always. You burn so that you may forge. You must become a pilgrim of your own purpose, A wanderer not in search of the final answer, but in pursuit of deeper and truer questions. You must allow the winds of uncertainty to rattle your branches. You must dare to bloom in places that others claimed were barren. You must learn to recognize the voice of your own will, not the will that was handed to you, but the will that emerges when all of the masks fall and all of the echoes fade and all of the mirrors shatter. And when you hear that voice, that true, feral, holy voice from within, you must follow it, even if it leads you into the wilderness, into the unknown, especially if it leads you into the wilderness, into the unknown, because that is where the real magic lives. Not in the safety of the settled ground, but in the wild unknown, where new selves are born. So, fellow children of chaos, let us not be statues of selfhood, trapped in frozen poses of performative identity. Let us be storms, shifting, spiraling, and seeking. Let us refuse to worship at the altar of the reflection and instead dive into the waters beneath it. Let us be bold enough to be unfinished. Let us be sacred works in progress. Let us be shapeshifters. And if you're not sure what to comment down below, then answer me these questions. Are you the narrator? Or are you the narrative? Or is there no distinction between the two? May you dance with chaos. May you laugh in the darkness. May you sing in the abyss. May you wander for the love of wandering. Amen. Fare thee well. Oh, I made a mistake! Give. All right, fuck you.
My razor. I shake off like a puppy.
You covered my hair, Sal. You little bastard.
If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment down below. If you like the shit I did, give a thumbs up to the vid. If you want to see some shit, give the link below a click. If you want to be a